The advice and opinions expressed on the show, as this is paid programming, are solely that of Jung's Garden Center, not necessarily WBEV or Good Karma Brands. Welcome in, everybody, to Taking Care of Business, today featuring Dick Zondag, the Garden Doctor from Jung Garden Center. Dick, good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's a little bit colder outside than it has been for a few days.
Yeah, a little cool, and from what I understand, next week it's supposed to start getting warmer. So
But we're past the frost danger now, right?
oh yeah,
Well past that.
I don't think we're going to get frost. I mean, it would have to be some really unusual situation, but yeah, cool nights still here, and there's still time to get your planting done, and garden. Actually, I haven't planted my garden yet because of my physical problems and stuff like that, but I'm still going to be planting one probably in another week or so.
Right. And luckily for people out there who are looking at their garden and maybe things aren't growing as quickly as they'd like, the colder weather can kind of affect that. But as we get into those warmer temps, we're going to see things kind of spring to life pretty quick.
Yeah, they'll as soon as the warm weather hits, they'll start growing. I mean, the roots and the roots of the things that you planted are growing because they're in a warmer situation. The seeds are germinating, and so on the way in, I was admiring all the rows of corn that you can see now too, and they are coming up, and so the seeds that you're planting in your garden should be coming up. It's even, I think, warm enough now to plant your vine crop seeds. We usually like to have a warmer soil when they go in because there's so much starch in the seed that
Right.
if you plant them too early, and they sit there and it's cold and wet, they'll be attacked by the microorganisms in the soil and won't germinate. So, it's time to get your planting done, and I think the soil is warm enough now that things will start popping out of the ground.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to have a whole bunch of questions for you, but we do want to let everybody know, of course, the phone lines and text line are open if you have questions for the Garden Doctor. For those who don't know, last show of the spring season, and so that always means that if you wait till next week with questions, you're already too late.
Yep.
Now is definitely the time to call in. You can call us at 920-885-4446 or call or text us at 920-887-9595. Jeff Hall is standing by for you in the studio to get your texts and calls and make sure they are directed down to us. So feel free to do so. Now, I came up with a list of questions and some things that I observed and had people ask me about that I wanted to make sure I was ready to talk to you about. So we'll start with lawns because we were talking a little bit about lawns.
Sure.
For one thing, I love how the warm weather just livens up everything in the lawn because we had that rain, quite a bit of rain, some heavy storms, and then we had a couple really nice warm days, and my lawn went from looking kind of drab green to bright and tall. I had to get out there and mow it quick because it was getting thick.
Sure.
And so, with the cooler weather we got now, I'm sure it'll slow it down. But this early summer, late spring, the grass can grow pretty quick.
Yeah,
right
grass
now.
is mainly a cool season crop, and so, as soon as the soil is warm enough and there's moisture there, that's going to green up and grow. And so, we're getting to the time when you shouldn't be fertilizing your lawn because lawns tend to go dormant during the summer and the weeds don't. And so, if you fertilize too late in the spring, you're fertilizing the weeds and not the lawn. And so the one thing that you can do in the lawn right now is to kill the broadleaf weeds that are the dandelions, which are done blossoming but have generated a lot of seed for the next few years. But if you want to control those, it's Weed Beater Ultra is an excellent herbicide that will take the dandelions, the creeping Charlie, the plantain, any of the broadleaf plants that are in your lawn out and leave the grass alone. So that can be done. You'll find that the grass starts to slow down. You won't need to mow your lawn once and a half a week, if you want to keep it nice and green, you mow it a little higher in the summer than you do in the springtime when you want to keep that lawn looking really, really nice. Be sure though that if you've got a lot of thatch on the lawn, if you've mowed when the grass was real high and you've got clumps of grass laying on the lawn, it's probably a good idea to get out there and rake those up and put those grass clippings in the compost bin or you can use them for mulch if you don't, you haven't treated for weeds. If it's just the grass and the fertilizer, you can use those for mulch in your garden, and it'll decompose as the season goes and help keep the weeds down, and then it'll add to the organic matter in your soil. Or you can put it in the compost pile and put layers of other things between it so that that it's not just grass it's decomposing, because as grass gets kind of slimy, kind of mats down, and so it becomes anaerobic. So you should mix other components and then turn the pile every once in a while so that you get the inside out. But grass clippings, if you leave them on the lawn, what happens is they will start to decompose. But if you build up a thatch on top of the soil, the grass actually starts rooting into that thatch, and then it becomes more susceptible to the summer dry spells. And so getting that thatch off the lawn gives you a good source of mulch, or you can just get rid of it at your local municipal composting area. And then in the summertime, the only time you want to really water the lawns is the only time you really water lawns is if you want to keep them green. You should keep watering them all the time.
Right.
Once a week or once every 10 days. If you don't get rain, you should water the lawn, and then water it deep so that the roots go deep. Most people just let the lawns alone in the summertime, and they get kind of brown, but they're just dormant. The roots under the soil and the growing point just below the surface of the soil are good and healthy if you fertilized in the springtime, and then you don't have to worry about it coming back. And then in early or mid-August, early September, then you fertilize it again, because then you're going into another growing season, and your lawn will look much nicer then.
I have questions about lawn care, because I was looking at a neighbor's lawn recently, and I saw some of those telltale yellow spots where the grass is yellowed out and it looks drier. And I think in the past you said that's probably because they got a dog.
Yep.
What can they do to prevent those?
There's nothing you can do. The only thing you really, if you want to keep the dog in a separate area, but it's wherever that dog does its thing, especially female dogs. That's where you're going to get these little patches of yellow, and especially if they do it in the same spot every time. And then the only way you really get rid of that is to water it down so that you leach the urine out of the soil, and then reseed it and put a little straw on top to keep the seed moist while it's germinating, and then it'll probably come back really fast, because then there's a lot of nitrogen there for it to grow. I have a female dog, and she likes to do her thing in different spots, and you can see where those spots are, because they're a little greener than the rest of the lawn. So I guess I got to get out and fertilize my lawn. But you want to have a nice looking lawn in front of your house. It kind of dresses it up. It makes a frame for the house, and then having a nice lawn really does show that you care about your house and your home.
And having a nice lawn is often a sense of pride for guys. I know
Sure.
that we get out there and we like to mow and look back at how we did and enjoy maybe a cold sudsy beverage. As a matter of fact, I was sitting out at my neighbor's house. We were discussing his yard, and he's got a spot that, of course, all the guys gathered around and we were talking about, because it's a spot that, for no reason, it seems to be dried up and dead. Yeah. Everything around it seems to be fine, and everybody's got their opinions as to why. somebody said, well, maybe you got something in the ground that's preventing the water from staying. Maybe it's rocks. Maybe the soil's, draining too fast. Everybody had their opinions.
Yeah.
But any insights into why that might be?
I think probably the easiest way to diagnose that is to dig down, dig some of the soil away and see what is underneath there. Because usually if there's problems with a spot in the lawn, especially if it's a new house, it means that there's maybe some wood buried on, the construction people, instead of taking their wood with the scrap wood with them, usually just dig a hole and put it in instead of, they're not really supposed to burn it either, but they'll dig a hole and bury all the scraps and stuff that they generated in building the house. And then down the road a few years, you find that there's a lot more mushrooms coming up, or that the grass isn't growing well. And the other thing that could just be is that there's a hard pan there or something that you have to break up and then reseed it. So, yeah, it takes a little bit of diagnosis to figure out what's going on.
All right, I'll tell them to get the shovels out and we'll start digging. Yep. Looks like we do have a call on line one, so we're going to go ahead and go to the phones. Hello, caller. You're on with the Garden Doctor.
Good morning. I have a question for you regarding grass. Okay, we have well water.
Okay.
It is pretty high in iron. And now for watering the grass, does well water like that and the iron, will that burn, or can it burn the lawn if I'm trying to water the different areas or whatever throughout?
No, well water with iron in it will not hurt the grass. I mean, if you're mowing it every week, what you're doing is basically mowing the iron down. And the only thing that it would do is discolor if you're using it on your shrubs or your trees or things, best thing to do is water the soil and not the plant, because the iron will, as the water evaporates, the iron will stay behind. And we had trouble with that in our container nursery, where we have quite a bit of iron in the water. And what we ended up doing is digging a pond, and then the iron precipitates out and we pump the water out of the pond rather than out of the well directly on the plants, and the iron precipitates out, and then the water is clear. So it's not going to hurt the lawn to water with well water that has iron in it. Just that you want to, with plants that stay there, that you're not cutting all the time, you water the soil, and that way the iron will stay on the soil.
Oh, okay. Even like you said, then even like for Carl Forster plants or spireas, whatever, you just want to water around them, not pouring like buckets of water kind of thing right on top of it.
Right. Either that, or what you can do is take the bucket and let the water sit overnight, or for a day or two, and then you'll find that the iron will precipitate out, because the iron in the water is dissolved, and once it hits air, it forms iron oxide, which is the bronzy colored substance, and it will go to the bottom of the pail, and then the water is clear. So, yeah, iron's a pretty problematic thing. I know we have just a little bit of iron in the water that we have from our well in our house, and the toilets once in a while have to be cleaned and stuff, but it's not going to hurt the plants.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And thank you for your call. Okay. Anybody else who wants to call? Again, the numbers you can call us at here to talk with the Garden Doctor, 920-885-4446 and 920-887-9595. That 9595 number, also a text line if you want to text your question in for Dick, the Garden Doctor. You talked about using your lawn clippings in the compost pile, and got into a debate recently with somebody about what you should and should not be throwing in your compost pile. And I could have swore, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, that you said you should stay away from fats and greases and things of the sort. Your green materials is really what you want to be putting in there.
The greens and browns, you don't want to put the wastes from meats or poultry or anything like that, but anything that's been alive. I mean, eggshells are excellent because they have calcium in them, and if you run them through the grinder, through the mix, or through
In the blender,
the blender,
right?
it'll break it up into smaller pieces, and the calcium will be more available. But the only thing that you really don't want to put in a compost pile are those types of things. I don't like to put weeds that have gone to seed in the pile either, because most of the time the seeds are pretty, at least the new seeds are pretty resistant to being decomposed. And so by putting weed seed in your compost pile, then when you put it on the garden, you're spreading the weeds. But anytime other than that, any weeds that are in the garden that are just green, it's an excellent source of organic matter. And then grass clippings, but like I said, if you're just using grass clippings and you try to compost them all by themselves, they get kind of slimy and they do it anaerobically. It's best to mix them with, if nothing else, if you've got compost there, to mix them with the compost that you have there, or to put straw or hay or any of the weeds and things that you have, or any browns. I mean, even paper you can compost with the grass clippings, because grass clippings have a lot of nitrogen in them, and that's really what drives the speed of the composting.
All right, we do have another call. I'm going to ask you more about composting, but first, let's go to line 1. Hello, you're on with the Garden Doctor.
Yeah, that's me.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So, question about fertilizer.
Sure.
My mother left me with some containers that she probably was using for many, many years, and I've got 4 of them here. They're labeled with her writing 959-8, and it's called a blooming rooting fertilizer.
Okay.
There's another container with 24-18-16.
Okay.
And there's another one 15-30-15, and then it's labeled sage, thyme, and oregano. Must be specific. And one that's got miracid soil acidifier plant food with chelated iron. I don't know what chelated iron is, but is this something I can still use if I dilute it enough, or should I maybe get rid of it?
No, the one thing that you want to remember is if the first number is quite high, you want to go very light with it. But now is the time that you want to use nitrogen in the garden, because if you want to get the plants off to a good start, the nitrogen is what you want. I mean, I planted onions and I've already fertilized them once with a high nitrogen fertilizer, because what nitrogen does is it forces vegetative growth. You don't want to use it later in the season because it does the same thing. It forces vegetative growth, which should be going into the fruiting and into the part of the produce that you're going to eat. I mean, if you over fertilize carrots or beets or the root crops with too much nitrogen, you'll get beautiful tops, but there won't be anything in the ground. So
And the
the
chelated
ones,
iron won't hurt anything?
yeah, with the ones with the higher nitrogen you want to use right now. The first one that you mentioned that was kind of a balanced fertilizer, you can use that at any time. The muracid, the one that has the chelated iron means that it's iron is attached to a molecule that makes it more readily available to a plant. And muracid is a fertilizer that you use on evergreens or on azaleas and rhododendrons and plants that need that are acid-loving plants that need an acid soil, because Wisconsin sits on a big piece of limestone, and so our soils are normally basic. And so you want to get the iron is very essential in plant growth, in that iron and manganese are the central part of a chlorophyll molecule, which is the molecule that fixes sunlight into energy. And so with muracid, it's excellent for evergreens. You can actually use it in your garden. There's nothing wrong with using it there, but it's mainly meant for evergreens and for acid-loving plants.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you for calling.
And we actually are going to go right back to another caller on line 2. Hello, you're on with the Garden Doctor.
Good morning. I was wondering, I put the donut oil spray on my apple trees, and then I have some Bonide fruit tree spray that was on sale. I don't remember where I got it from last summer, and I was already done with the fruit for that summer for spraying. and I was going to use it this summer. And I used I tried using it, but it wasn't coming out of the container at all. You hook it up to the end of the hose, and I sprayed a couple trees, and nothing came out. So now I went and got some other stuff. And is it too late to put that on now, or do you think I'm not wasting my money or time?
Okay, dormant oil has to go on very early in the spring before the leaves start to come out, because if you use
The Bonide.
yeah
Sorry.
if you use the dormant spray, which is an oil-based
Yeah.
house
Put on
cleaning, if you use it
when
now,
it's
you're
cold.
gonna burn the leaves. So that one is for either early spring before the leaves come out, or in fall after the leaves have dropped. And you spray
Yeah,
the
that
tree.
I put on in March. The oil I put on in March.
Right.
And now I bought that Bonide fruit tree spray.
Okay, the Bonide fruit tree spray that's hard and doesn't come through the sprayer. What you want to do with that is to put it in a styrofoam cup or a container that you're not going to want to reuse, and put a little bit of water in it and work it into a paste. You know, just put a little water in it, and then as the water disappears, put a little bit more and put a little bit more until it becomes a solution. And then you put that
Okay.
solution in your sprayer with the amount of water that you need to bring it up to the volume that you need, and then it'll work fine. The new stuff, the same thing. The way that you work with powders is you make them into a slurry before you put them in the water, because if you put the powder, a lot of the powders are not real soluble in water, and if you just dump them on water and then try to shake them up, they don't go into solution very easily. But if you make a slurry out of them and then keep adding water to them, similar to what you do with flour when you're making gravy, you know, where you want to put flour into a mixture for gravy, you make it into a paste before you add it, and then you add it slowly as a liquid rather than as a solid, and it works much better. And it's the same way with the powders that you the pesticides come in a powder. Make it into a slurry before you put it into the water, and it'll be much more soluble, and it'll stay in solution much better.
Okay. What I bought was the kind you hook onto the end of the hose, and it's already mixed.
All
But I
right.
wonder if I would, put that thing in a bucket of water. If you take the top off, I would imagine it's a hose going down to the bottom.
Well,
I
it's
put that in a bucket of water and see that it's sucking it up. Then I could almost put a little water in that mixture that was pre-mixed.
yeah,
huh?
that's what you have to do. I mean, if you're using a hose end sprayer, you've got to get that powder into a solution so that it can be siphoned into that sprayer. So take the container that has the pesticide in it. Probably should wear gloves when you're doing this, but then you just add water to it and make it into a slurry so that it can be siphoned up.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay,
But
thanks
it's
for
not
calling.
too late now, right? I mean, it's
No,
probably
no,
about the
no.
time.
In fact, there are 3 sprays that you do with fruit trees. First, when they come out, when the leaves are at what's called silver tip, when they're about the size of your little fingernail, that's the first time that you spray. And then you spray when the buds are starting to open, and then when the petals drop. Those are the 3 most important sprays for fruit.
Okay. But
Okay?
if I missed the 2 in the middle because I was going to use that, and then
Yeah.
I
And then you
didn't
can
get back
spray
to
it.
the store.
Yeah, you can spray every week to 10 days if you want to have perfect apples. Or fruit. You have to spray pretty consistently through the summer, every week to 10 days or after every rain. So yeah, you can use it all summer long.
Sounds good. Thank you for your help.
Yep.
All right. Thanks for calling.
Bye.
And if you have a question for the Garden Doctor, again, you can give us a call, 920-885-4446 or 920-887-9595. That second number, again, our call and text line. So when go back to talking about compost here for a little bit longer.
Sure.
How do we take care of our compost piles? I know you mentioned turning it over.
Right.
Should we be watering them? Should we be, doing anything else specific to them to kind of?
Okay, well, let's start from the beginning. When you're building a compost pile, you want to use greens and browns. I guess if you go on YouTube, there's all kinds of videos on this, but the greens are the things that are green. The grass clippings, the leaves if you're doing it in the summertime, the weeds that are green, and the browns are like straw or hay or things like that. You want to mix them together, and you put a 6-inch layer of organic matter. And usually people like to use a bin because it keeps the sides exposed to the oxygen, because the aerobic microorganisms, the ones that need air, are more efficient at breaking down the cellulose, which is what you're doing when you're composting. You're breaking down the cellulose in the structures that you're composting. And then I like to inoculate that 6-inch pile with fertilizer. If it's mostly browns in the fall, I use a fertilizer on top of that 6-inch layer. And if it's dry, you put water, sprinkling can or so full of water on it, and then you start over again. 6-inch layer, fertilizer, and then the inoculant. And you can buy the inoculant at Jung's. But if you've been composting and adding compost to your soil over the time, those microorganisms are in the soil, and so you just use soil as your inoculant. So 6 inches of compost, or 6 inches of organic matter, fertilizer if it's leaves. If it's green, you probably don't need the fertilizer, and then water if it's dry, and then inoculant, which is soil. And then you just keep doing that. And then as the pile starts to shrink in size, you want to get the outside part of it to the inside, and so you just take a pitchfork or whatever, pull the bin away and turn it over so that the organic matter is turned and mixed. And if your compost pile is working right, you should see, even in summertime, you should see steam coming off, because that decomposition is called an exothermic reaction. It gives off heat. And so that's what keeps it going. And that's why in the wintertime, very seldom, if your compost pile is working, even if it's working slowly, snow will not accumulate on it because there's heat being given off. And then you just keep doing that. And I always tell people, if you can't recognize the things that you put into the compost pile, if the leaves are now non-recognizable, if you can't peel them apart and stuff like that, you can use it on your garden, because then the decomposition has happened, and it will not affect the growth of a plant when you add it to the garden. If you can see the leaves, if you can see the grass clippings, just leave it in the pile for another year, because if you add it to the garden when it's not completely decomposed, it starts taking up nutrients that the plants should be using, and your plants will look like they're kind of starving when there's plenty of nutrients there, but the decomposition that's going on in the soil is robbing the plants of their nutrients. So, it's a good idea to get it at least partially, if not fully, decomposed before you add it to the garden.
There you go. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something on my yard. About 2 years ago, I think 2 years ago, our rhubarb, we have very nice rhubarb. It was a transplant from a rhubarb hill that was split on my parents' property.
Sure.
It's been on our property since we moved in, and the rhubarb leaves on this thing were just massive. We get a great crop from it every year. And then about 2 years ago, one of my kids, while it was still starting, hit it with the weed whacker and took it all down because they weren't paying attention, didn't realize that it was something we wanted to grow. It came back. Last year it was fine. This year it seems to be much smaller.
Okay. The problem is that rhubarb is a fast grower. It needs to be divided probably every 3 or 4 years. And the division is very simple. You just take a shovel or a sharp shovel, and you go right down through the middle of the clump, and you dig half of it out. just like you did when you divided it to bring it to your property.
Right.
And then you can divide that again, so you want to have at least a few growing points on each division that you put in the ground, and then you can plant those divisions and you get more rhubarb. The piece that you leave in the ground you should fertilize, because they are heavy feeders and they've been injured and they want to get fed. And you leave the cut surface open to the sunlight for a week or so, because you want that injured area to callus over,
Right.
and then away it goes. And you mentioned one of the symptoms of a rhubarb that needs to be divided. The other symptom is that it's throwing out a lot of flowers. Plants, when they get under stress, and that when it gets too big, it starts to rot in the middle and stuff like that. It's under stress,
Gotcha.
tends to go into a flowering state. And so if you're getting 3 or 4 flower stalks in the rhubarb, it means that it wants to be divided. And so then and the time to do it is either mid-fall, like in maybe late September, early October, when the plant is pretty much dormant, or in the springtime after the ground opens up, but before the plant starts to grow too much. We're too late now. I mean, the plants are pretty much leafed out, and you really don't want to do it right now, because the plants will struggle, at least the divisions that you take off from it. So best to do it when the plant is semi-dormant to dormant, and so that's late fall or early spring.
Any particular type of fertilizer I should use when I?
You can use a high nitrogen fertilizer on rhubarb, because you're not eating the reproductive part of it, you're eating the vegetative part of it. And so asparagus, rhubarb, onions in the early stages of plants you can use a pretty high nitrogen fertilizer on and grass. Of course, grass is a vegetative thing, and so you want it to grow. And so you'll find that most grass fertilizers have a very high first number in relation to the other two. The only grass fertilizer is the winterizer when you're in late fall and you don't want it to grow, you want it to go dormant. Then you have a lot less nitrogen in that last application of fertilizer for your lawn.
All right. I'll keep that in mind, and hopefully I'll report back much more rhubarb next year. I want to talk to you a little bit about tomatoes and potatoes.
Okay.
I talked to a lot of people, and I've heard it said that they're a great pairing crop to put in the ground. I talked to somebody, might have been your brother, who was mentioning that there is a tomato plant that's tomatoes on the top, potatoes on the bottom.
Yeah, they're first cousins, tomatoes and potatoes. And so you can graft a tomato onto a potato vine, and if the graft takes, it will produce tomatoes on a potato vine. With potatoes, you want to plant them, and then you've got to make sure that you hill them up as they grow, because you want the potatoes to be in the dark. You don't want them exposed to the sunlight, because a potato tuber is actually a piece of stem tissue, and if it is exposed to the sunlight, it turns green. And if you want to eat that potato, you got to cut that green off before you eat it, because it's not going to kill you, but it can make it's sort of toxic.
Right.
So you got to cut that part off. But and with potatoes and tomatoes, you do want to use a little bit more nitrogen as they're starting to grow. And you got to think with fertilizer, you got to think about what those 3 numbers are. Nitrogen is something that forces vegetative growth, and when you're planting potatoes, you're planting tomatoes, you want those things to get off to a good start. And so you want to use a fertilizer that has a little bit more nitrogen in it. And and even in the soluble plant foods, you want to do that. As the summer goes along, the nitrogen, you want to cut back on the nitrogen, because plants, if you have too much nitrogen, will produce a lot of vegetative growth.
Right.
I mean, you can grow a 20-foot tomato vine if you put too much nitrogen on, but
We
you'll
won't get
never
any
get any
tomatoes.
tomatoes.
Right.
So you want nitrogen to get them going, but then second, third, fourth, if you're going to fertilize them, you want to use more phosphorus and potassium, which are the second and the third numbers. And phosphorus has to do with energy transfer. If you really get down in the weeds with the way plants grow, it carries the energy from the chlorophyll to make carbohydrates. And it also has to do with a good, healthy root system. And so you want to use a high phosphorus fertilizer like bone meal, or, bone meal is an excellent fertilizer for a late summer, early fall fertilization, because it has the phosphorus in it that gives you good root health. Potassium is more for the general health of the plant. It has to do with the phytochrome system, keeps the plant kind of knowing what it should be doing at the certain particular time of the season. And the time of the season is governed by the day length. So, as the days are getting longer now, the plants know that it's time to get growing. And then in the late summer and early fall, the days are getting shorter, and that's the first signal for a plant that it's time to get ready for winter. Or for onions, it's time to bulb up, because that's going to be for the onion, you're eating the first year's growth, but the seed that's produced from an onion comes from the second year. And so the onion is not growing for you, it's growing to make a flower stalk for next year. Same way with carrots and beets and some of the others. They're biennials. The part that we eat is the root that would produce the seed for next year, but you're eating it because carrots taste great, and beets are good, and onions make really good flavorful food. And so, by knowing what each of those elements are good for, it helps you kind of, it's why I can tell you what to use at certain times of the year, because I just have to think a little bit about what you're trying to do. You're trying to either produce a stronger plant with more green growth. That's when you want the nitrogen. Or if you want it to slow down and do what it's supposed to do as far as producing peas or the vegetables, then you want to use the more phosphorus and potassium, which helps that particular situation.
And so when you're looking at fertilizers over there at Jung's, obviously you guys can answer those questions if we need it, but we can see those three numbers and kind of get an idea in our head of what we need to be.
Exactly. And got different analysis of fertilizer for different times of the year. So, and our people should be able to tell you, what fertilizer to use. We have a lot of different formulations, and there are different formulations for different plants too. So if you want something specific for asparagus, we have that, asparagus food. Or if you want something for peas or beans, be the inoculant when you're planting them, and then a fertilizer that doesn't have as much nitrogen in, because the nitrogen is coming from those nodules that are on the root system from the inoculant. So.
And I know you have it specifically for some flowering plants as well, because I know we've picked up stuff specifically for roses.
Sure. Yep. And and that's the same thing with roses. You don't want to be using a high nitrogen fertilizer in late summer, because that nitrogen will cause more growth. And with roses, especially roses, because they're as long as things are going well for them, they keep growing. And when the days are starting to get shorter and the nights getting longer, then you want to stop giving them nitrogen, because that keeps them merrily going along. And then all of a sudden winter is here and they're not ready for it. So, with roses, you want to use nitrogen right now because you want to initiate the growth, because that'll give you the nice flowers. But, in mid to late summer, you start backing off on the nitrogen and use more phosphorus and potassium. You stop pruning, you stop watering, so that they go dormant naturally, and that way they have a better chance of coming through the winter. I had a tough winter. I mean, the roses this year, I had a lot more winter kill or dieback than I normally have. So it depends on the winter too, as to how roses will make it through.
We lucked out this year. We actually did the styrofoam cones, and it was our first year doing it, and all of ours luckily came back, didn't
Yeah.
have any problem, which was good.
Yeah, the winter protection of the styrofoam cones or putting soil around the base of the plant really help out with overwintering with roses.
Going back into the tomatoes and potatoes, I know we have a lot of tomato varieties available. You guys have a whole catalog devoted to it. But if I want to do something different from the standard, boring russet potato, do you guys have other potato varieties we can look
Sure.
into?
I mean, there are actually a couple different types of potatoes depending on what you want. There are some that are excellent for baking and for French fries and things like that. Not so good for mashed potatoes and things like that. So, if you're looking for a good baking potato, Superior's a very good variety. If you're looking for a general all-around potato, Kennebec is an excellent one. We have the fingerling potatoes. We have Yukon Gold, which is a very good all-around potato. Has golden colored flesh, and so a lot of people are planting that one. So we have, I think, probably 6 or 8 different varieties, and if you get them in the ground right now, you're still going to get a crop.
Another question I have for you, and this is something that I kind of had asked of me, and they said I should ask you. When we think about the garden, in my generation, when we think about the garden, we think about things that maybe we haven't talked a lot about. Kohlrabi, radishes, parsnips.
Mm-hmm.
Are there things that we just aren't growing as much anymore, or are there things that we should be growing that we're not?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of vegetables that are, that years past have been grown, but are really, good. Parsnips, I love parsnips. They're
Same.
really good. If you put a flour breading on them and fry them in butter,
I haven't done breaded before. That's okay.
Oh, yeah, you just slice them like, instead of making coins out of them, you slice them the other way and you put them in an egg yolk batter and then flour them and then fry them. Is really good. Eggplant's another one that a lot of people are not using, but make excellent. My dad loved eggplant, so we used to have it 3 or 4 times a week when it was in season. And
Eggplant parmesan was about a weekly meal in our
there's
household.
a lot of, and then the root crops, the rutabagas, and that sort of stuff. But you try them and you like them. There's things that you go back to, and if you need to get information on how to prepare them, YouTube has always got something on a lot of different ideas and things like that. So yeah.
Worth checking them out. We do, of course, want to remind everybody of all your locations, your hours, and you got a little bit of an announcement on that.
Yeah, we have stores in 2 of them in Madison, one in Sun Prairie, one in Stoughton and Randolph and Stevens Point. This summer we're trying something new. We're going to be closed on Tuesdays, so Randolph store hours are 9 to 5, and the new store hours start next week. They're 9 to 5 Monday, and then Wednesday through Saturday. We're closed on Sunday and on Tuesday. The Madison, the Stoughton, Stevens Point stores, 9 to 5 Monday through Monday, and then Tuesday they'll be closed, and then Wednesday through Sunday they will be open 9 to 5. So, you have the computers that tell you this sort of stuff and that sort of stuff, and we're doing a lot less business on Tuesdays, and so that's giving our people a day off, and so we'll be closed on Tuesday and Sunday in Randolph, Tuesdays in the other garden centers, and the store hours are 9 to 5.
There you go. So if you're in the listening area and you want to make your way out to Jung Garden Center, avoid Tuesdays and Sundays in Randolph and Tuesdays at all the other locations.
Yeah, and the stores are chock full of container, nursery stock, trees. It's time to get those things out, and we still have a lot of annuals and perennials and hanging baskets and things like that. And I think the hanging basket special, where you buy one, you get another one for half price, is still on
There you
for
go.
this week.
Great way to beautify your yard, and you don't have to
Yep.
put anything in the ground. I like it. Well, Well, Dick, as always, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Yep.
It's bittersweet that it's our last show of the spring
it's
season,
probably the last show, that we're going to have for a while. So
but we look forward to talking to you, and of course, I'll see you out there at Jung's periodically. I'm sure.
very good.
This has been a paid program. The advice and opinions expressed on the program are solely that of Jung Garden Center, not necessarily WBEV or Good Karma Brands.